Have you ever wanted to deeply understand the inner world of somebody that you're dating, in particular, dismissive avoidant attachment style? Well, in this video, we are going to unpack exactly what the inner world of a dismissive avoidant attachment style looks like, particularly around relationships and connections, so that you can come to navigate these relationships with more ease, more harmony, and more comfort. Now, if you're not familiar with what dismissive avoidant attachment style is, dismissive avoidant attachment style is one of four major attachment styles. Every single person has one. There is a securely attached style who statistically does the best in relationships, an anxious attachment style who tends to fear abandonment, a fearful avoidant style who tends to fear abandonment but also not want too much closeness. They can be very hot and cold and very flip-flopping and back and forth in their relationships. And then we have a dismissive avoidant who generally grows up with some form of childhood emotional neglect. And as a result, they really tend to need a lot of space. They don't want to be too vulnerable. They don't want to open up or let their guard down because when they felt that way as a child, it usually caused a little bit of hardship and feeling like they couldn't get their emotional needs met even though they had them. So they sort of give up on their emotional needs in various ways and to varying degrees. And this is a big part of what dismissive avoidant attachment becomes. So, one of the first things that you want to understand is, and we'll go through nine major things, is that as an adult, one of the first big parts of the dismissive avoidance inner world is that they don't naturally factor others' needs into their decision making process. And it's not because they don't care and it's not because they're not considerate. It's because it's like a foreign language to do this. I want you to imagine that you're a child, you grow up in a home where nobody's really doing that with each other because there's a lot of avoidance in the household. And because of that, there's not modeling for like, hey, I'm going to look out for you or support you when you're going through a hard time. Or, hey, how was your day? Are you feeling okay? I noticed you're off. Is there anything I can do to support you? There isn't this modeling. It's almost like everybody is sort of like a ship passing in the night. And because of that, there's no conditioning around this. There's very little modeling, very little programming around, hey, I'm going to lean on you and you can lean on me. And we can make sure that we show up for ourselves. That's just not there foundationally. So it's like a foreign language. It's like asking somebody to sort of speak a language that isn't coming naturally to them. Number two, dismissive avoidants are less relationally motivated than other attachment styles. And usually this is because dismissive avoidants don't have really high needs for love and connection. So they tend to prioritize other things. They tend to prioritize safety, comfort, community, camaraderie, work and ambition, achievement. Like you'll see a lot of these sorts of things, but you will often not see them prioritize relationships. And again, it's based on their programming in childhood. They usually didn't have as many positive emotional associations to deriving a sense of support and connection and safety from people. And so they derived their sense of connection, safety to the meaning they get from their work or to the belongings that they have, to the house that they own, to their achievements as a person. Like it tends to be in places where they actually felt like they had more of a sense of control because human relationships usually felt sort of out of their reach in a lot of ways in those meaningful moments where there's this vulnerability and deeper connection. So as a result of that, as adults, they just don't have a lot of conditioning to put that as a big priority. And I want to note on this second point here that if you are not able to receive support from somebody else, that is a form of a trauma response, right? If you're in a place where you're not able to really ask for your needs, request support, and if you're also in a place where you're not even willing to receive it if somebody does try to support you, that's because you've had enough negative programming around what it means to try to rely on others. And in particular, if you felt like you couldn't rely on others or it was unsafe or it wasn't workable for you, that usually represents that there was some really painful chapter or season of life where that happened in the first place. Number three, dismissive avoidance will often fear commitment in relationships because flaw finding becomes a protective measure. Now, if we look more deeply into this, dismissive avoidance also don't have a lot of modeling for how to resolve conflicts and work things out. So they try to look for perfect partners where they're mitigating any chances of conflict. But generally, that's actually because at a deeper level, they don't trust themselves to know how to resolve conflict, right? If you don't feel like you can communicate with somebody, hash things out, talk about your needs, get to proper resolution, then the conflict that you have with somebody else is just going to wear and wear and wear away on your relationship. So instead, dismissive avoidants have some degree of awareness that they don't really know how to resolve conflict. So they try to look for the perfect partner that they won't have conflict with. But of course, that becomes an illusion, right? That becomes something that's not actually there because every single relationship will go through a power struggle. And as a result of that, there's going to be a necessity in order to evolve and grow in your relationships to navigate conflict in healthy ways so that you can communicate and grow stronger because of your differences and because communication allows you to do that. Number 4, dismissive avoidants tend to feel safe in their independence and autonomy. And what's really interesting is because they value this so much, they tend to project it onto others, wanting to support others in that. I've had many dismissive avoidants over the years say things to me like, oh, I'm really trying to protect my partner's independence, but they don't seem to care. They don't seem to really want that independence. And part of what happens is because their independence is so sacred to them. Because if you grew up in a household where you couldn't get your needs met either, you would be like, okay, I have to rely on myself. And there's a certain degree of importance around that, an emphasis around that because it gets your needs met when others weren't, right? So because of that, they tend to value that so much in their life and they tend to value that for other people, which can sometimes sort of fall on deaf ears, right? If you have a partner who's not wanting those same things, sometimes DAs will go out of their way to give that to other people and it won't even be properly received. So really, really important to note. Number 5, dismissive avoidants generally tend to be very sensitive to the feedback they get from others. In other words, they tend to really, take criticism to heart. And part of this is because they're not really great at receiving compliments and acknowledgement from other people, nor are they often really seeking it too much. And so it's almost like if you already have less money in your bank account and somebody takes more away, it hurts more, right? You feel it more. And you can think of that as sort of being the analogy for a dismissive avoidant. If they, don't have this abundance of emotional connection, of validation, acknowledgement from their relationships, and sort of an abundance there of receiving it, then when they get criticism, it lands differently, right? It feels like the last $5 in your bank account. Number 6, dismissive avoidants don't derive a lot of comfort from other people. They, as you might know from watching this channel, tend to fixate on creature comforts, again, because of the same subconscious programming in childhood. What they tend to do is if they couldn't get their needs met, they try to get needs met through things that they can basically source independently from other people, right? If they are constantly trying to look for sources that are in their control and predictable, this means that they'll get their needs met from, binge eating food, from binge watching television or movies, from listening to music and that being a really big go to, or from drinking or different substances. I had a client one time say, my husband loves his boat more than he loves me. And, it sounds sort of like, humorous, but she meant it and she felt that way. And I'm sure that was not an accurate depiction of what her husband felt, but it was an accurate depiction of how he was showing up because what he was trying to do is spend all this time on the boat and cleaning the boat and fixing the boat. And she would be like, why doesn't he spend that much quality time with me? Well, part of that was that he was getting regulated through that activity because he was sourcing this need for control independently, right? Through the boat and through having that time and freedom and space and autonomy, which were related back to his big needs. So we have 3 more things that we're going to cover. But I do want to say if you are dating a dismissive avoidant and you're trying to better understand them, or if you are a dismissive avoidant, we actually have courses for free that you can check out for 7 days, all about the dismissive avoidant with different attachment styles and relationships. And it gives you a roadmap for like DA with a fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant with an anxious preoccupied, and what's going to come up, what you can expect, what the challenges and pain points will be, and exactly the steps and tools you need to take to solve for those things through empowered communication, through vulnerability around discussing needs. Like there's some really powerful action steps in there. I will put that link down below if you want to check it out for free for 7 days. It'll just be there for a limited time. Number 7. Dismissive avoidants generally don't have many expectations of other people because they're not trying to source their needs from other people as much as they are on their own. And they sometimes feel confused and almost a little bit frustrated when other people expect a lot from them. Not because they don't care about people, but because they're sort of going like, "What is this? Where is this coming from?" If you grew up in a household where all the modeling was, "Hey, be really independent, do things for yourself," to suddenly have somebody in a connected relationship to you say, "No, no, no, you have to do these things for me," because dismissive avoidants don't believe deep down in their subconscious that, "Well, I can lean on you too. I can derive support from you too. I can ask you for my needs as well." That instead, they often feel sort of flustered when somebody discusses that with them. And so it's really healthy to have the discussion with a dismissive avoidant about compromises and learning to make compromises. You see, anxious preoccupieds are usually on this side of the continuum. They're too codependent. Dismissive avoidants are too counterdependent. They tend to avoid making compromises with other people and relationships. But what we're looking for is healthy, rooted, centered interdependence, which means I can meet my needs and I can rely on you to meet my needs and I can communicate them to you and I can receive them from you as well. And I'm really good at both. If you're not available for some reason, you're traveling or you had a bad day yourself, I don't have to rely on you. I can source for myself. Or, if I really need to rely on you and I need that extra support today outside of myself, I can go to you as well. And it doesn't feel scary or confusing or in a state of learned helplessness to be either or. Number 8, dismissive avoidants generally resort to logic and practicality as a sense of safety and comfort, right? They like to know that they can approach things practically and logically. And it's not just for a dismissive avoidant, it's not just like, oh, I value this. I think it's important. They actually derive safety from practicality, from logic. They tend to feel like that brings them back into control, which of course is because, as a general rule, they tend to when they couldn't emotionally develop in certain ways. It doesn't mean they're not developed at all, but it just means that they tend to put more of an emphasis on their intellectual development than emotional development because they tend to repress their emotional selves a lot of the time, which means it feels safe to be over here where I'm used to developing myself. Feels a little scary over here if I haven't really looked at my emotions and my emotional self. So you'll generally see this sort of, in a sense, like imbalance between those different areas. And last but not least, number 9, dismissive avoidants deeply yearn for harmony in relationships and connection without being engulfed. Okay. So they want not codependent relationships, not counterdependent relationships. Once they understand, they generally want that interdependency, but they also have to do that vulnerability work and learn to make healthy compromises as a means of getting there. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit more about the dismissive avoidant attachment styles in our world. Again, you can check out those courses I mentioned for free for 7 days using the link below. Thank you so much for being here and for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're enjoying this channel, and I can't wait to see you in future videos.